Roll call of the ARPA Committee members. Commissioner Markley,
Here.
Commissioner McKiernan,
Here.
Commissioner Townsend,
Here.
Commissioner Bynum,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Alan Howes,
Here.
Kathleen Von Atchen,
Here.
and Ashley Hand.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as you may recall, last discussion, we talked about both the application process for our nonprofits and many of our service providing UG departments. We also talked about commission-driven initiatives and things that we might like to move forward through Public Works or through Parks and Rec that would come outside of that application process. We requested that staff bring us some information to help us make decisions related to that commission-driven process. And so we have several staff members here today to make presentation. Kathleen, should I turn it over to you first for any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to share the agenda briefly so that we can have that on the record. So I'm going to share my screen briefly, and then we're going to pass it off to the departments. So can you see it? Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so we're going to start off with presentations from the Public Works Department regarding stormwater needs. And only have 25 minutes for that. So don't know if we'll be able to make that. That's a tight time frame because there's a lot there. And then we have another half hour set aside for discussing the Unified Government's facilities, which of course offers services to the public across a variety of policy areas. So just touching on that topic, the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan final rule from Treasury specifies that really the only type of improvements that we can make for facilities relate to improvement of air handling or other types of HVAC facility, components. But there is also some latitude in the language, which I believe Angel will talk about, to invest in recreation facilities or facilities that promote the childhood welfare and health. So we're going to be exploring those conversations, during the discussion coming up. And then the final part that we're hoping to catch, if there's enough time, also is to really look at the not only just recreation, but also the needs of the Parks Department and whether there's some opportunities to do ARPA funding in that area. And we're going to explore what other cities and counties across the country are doing in that realm. So with that, I am going to pass it off. The charge or discussion regarding stormwater or whatever he has planned here. So, okay. And here, stop sharing. There.
This is Jeff Fisher. Can you hear us?
Yeah,
Okay,
Jeff.
great. Thank you. I have Dave Reno here, and our Public Works Community Engagement Officer. Then we have John Kelly and Greg Wooten from Facilities, and then of course Angel with Parks and Rec. And it looks like stormwater is first on the agenda, so we'll speak to that. It's obviously an area that has had much discussion over the last few years. And so I think based on the direction we're going with stormwater and wastewater and the whole WIFIA package that we'll be discussing again Monday night, it probably makes the most sense right now to go with if we were to consider using ARPA funds on water infrastructure, I would probably recommend right now that we use that on wastewater to support that WIFIA package and allow us to optimize those opportunities. If the elected body was to address the stormwater in the near future, then my recommendation obviously would be to use whatever ARPA funds you elect to use on water, to use it on stormwater. Either one of those would benefit greatly from $3 million, $4 million, $5 million, up to $10 million, you know, whatever the allocation is. Several $1 million would help with the wastewater projects and or the stormwater project. We have a list of those project areas that you've seen before in our stormwater discussions, and we'll pull those up real quick. So you can see here, this is a fact sheet that was generated for our new county administrator, bring her up to speed on stormwater. And you can see here the 5th bullet point begins to talk about the WIFIA application, high priority stormwater projects, and then a little bit further here it gets into the wastewater projects as well. So we have areas like Big 11 and Jersey Creek, and where we have sewer separation and so on, that are important for our consent decree, but also just the welfare of the community. So real simply, if there was interest in allocating ARPA dollars to water infrastructure, this is how I would suggest using it. Take any questions, please.
Jeff, are there some of these projects that are more likely to be eligible for grants or better to finance versus not finance? I mean, are there any of these projects that rise to the top of the list as being best funded in this manner versus in another manner, or less likely to be funded in any other way?
I don't know if we could say that yet. There certainly are going to be opportunities. There are opportunities, and I know staff's exploring every opportunity that comes up. I don't know if we know enough to be able to answer that question well.
I did want to point out that joining us is a consultant from iParametrics who's very familiar with a variety of opportunities. And so just wanted to let you know that, you know, if you need to ask some of those questions, he has joined us with this call and is available. Okay.
Thank you, Governor.
Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I guess I was expecting kind of a presentation because I think some of this kind of lacks detail. Do we have pricing? Is there a grading of what's the most need? Is there just any more information, right? Are these prioritized in a certain way? Like what's some of the logic behind these particular projects, and what, you know, the recommended amount of funding? What can you all do with that? Thanks.
Well, we could provide that kind of detail, Commissioner. I don't have that, frankly, and ready to do that right now. These are all projects that were included in the WIFIA package that are prioritized over hundreds of other needs that provide the most impact to the community.
Right, I think, you know, Commissioner Davis, obviously you haven't been with us through the whole of the sort of progression of these projects, but I think probably to clarify for you and for anybody in the community that might be watching, these are the 9 priority projects. So they've gone through many iterations to narrow down to these being the highest priority 9 projects out of hundreds of projects that we need to complete. So it makes it kind of, it looks like a huge list and you're like, well, how do we choose these 9 projects? But we've whittled it down to these being the highest priority 9 projects over time. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that. I think for the purpose of this committee and this process, it would be good if we had something retrofitted for what we are doing here. Most likely, we're not going to be able to give anywhere near, nor do we have anywhere near the funding for WIFIA. And so it would be helpful if we had some sort of a grading process or some sort of prioritization within what's presented to us, and then a recommended amount of funding that we can kind of go back and forth on negotiating what would be right, appropriate, right? And then out of which pot of money, right, city, county, do we want to take it out of? I don't know if this information that's been presented to us is quite honestly worth us considering to, you know what I'm saying, even allocate funding for, because this isn't there's not enough information for ARPA. And maybe I'm the only one on this, I don't know, but I expected a little bit more. And I'm perfectly, you know, fine with sending this back to Public Works so that we can actually get something retrofitted for ARPA. Most likely, we're looking at $5 to $10 million maximum for this. I don't see any information that says this is what we can do with that money. And so that's kind of what I'm saying. I understand the WIFIA process, but we're not talking about WIFIA, we're talking about ARPA. And so I would like to see that.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And to be clear, it wasn't the WIFIA process that got down to these 9 projects either. It's been a longer discussion than that, but I think you're absolutely right. What we really need to know is if we were going to do one of these projects, how much would it cost? If we were going to do 2 of these projects, how much would it cost? If we were going to do 4 of these projects, how much would it cost? So we can get an idea of what we might allocate for. So I do think that is a fair analysis. We need to figure out what, maybe not what each project individually, but if there were a package of projects, what does that package look like and how much does each one cost, so we can decide. We don't want to just say we're going to give $100 and not be able to finish even one project with that. So Jeff, I don't know how hard it is to come up with sort of that, you know, layout of what might 1 look like, or 2 look like, or 5 look like, but I think that's what we need to get to if we're going to move forward with funding one of these.
Yeah, that's not hard. We can do that.
Commissioners, other questions? All right.
And this is
Go ahead,
Levert, but
Yeah.
For Jeff, and perhaps to address Commissioner Davis's question, are some of these projects written up through the CMIP process? And if so, can the analysis as developed, you know, through that CMIP process be shared, and perhaps addressing Commissioner Davis's concerns?
Yeah, I think so, Levert. We have the information. We just need to tailor it and get back to this committee and share that with you. That's not hard for us to do. Does that address your suggestion, Levert?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, and just Commissioner Davis, and just to kind of add on to that, I mean, I know you all have the work and everything panned out for Public Works, so this is not me kind of picking on you all. I just want to make sure that there's a process and that we have clarity and details on how we are allocating the funding. We have stormwater needs. There's no question about that. I just want to make sure that, you know, because most likely maybe 1 or 2 of these projects get funded through ARPA. All 9 will not be able to get funded through ARPA. And so it would be good to kind of have something retrofitted from our perspective where we can take this from 9 to maybe 3 or 2, and then look at, right, the cost of that, and then decide county, city, We're going to look at revenue replacement. We're going to look at other projects. Where in the ARPA funding do these suggestions fit? I don't think we have enough information right now to make that decision. We do have other meetings coming up, and so I would hope in the meantime you all would be able to do that.
Understood.
Go ahead, Alan.
And Jeff, maybe just ask too, because whether you're thinking about this and maybe help to clarify thinking on this, whether to fund sort of specific projects through ARPA dollars and or using ARPA dollars as kind of bridge funding for an enterprise fund from which the entire enterprise fund is then going to sort of fund these projects. And so it's, I think that may help to kind of clarify a little bit too, because it could be that the ARPA funding is a piece of the cost of these different projects as opposed to, or dollars are sort of fungible in a way, so maybe it doesn't matter, but versus sort of paying for the entirety of the Argentine project improvements, at the top of the list there, versus, like I said, that kind of bridge for what is the enterprise fund on stormwater that is paying for the overall stormwater remediation within the community.
Well, I'll try to speak to that. Thanks, Alan. It might be worth backing up a minute. The original discussion around the possibility of using ARPA funds on stormwater came from the work that had been done last fall, as one of the commissioners, suggested, wanted to explore an individually calculated rate model for stormwater versus a tiered structure that had been developed this last year. And by going through that work with the commissioner and Black and Beach, in order to keep the rate increases mild, there was a shortfall in that model for the individually calculated of about $10 million. So the discussion at that point was, if the commission decided to use ARPA dollars, we could either cover that shortfall entirely or help cover that shortfall and then figure out the rest, grants or otherwise. And so since then, no action's been taken on stormwater, but we still have this WIFIA package to submit an application next Tuesday. And so then, without any action taken on stormwater rates, the idea is that we center that WIFIA work around wastewater, which is wastewater fund has a lot of work to do due to the consent decree and the deteriorating infrastructure. And so we could target specific projects like has been suggested here and save the wastewater fund some dollars to help manage the workload that's on our plate right now. And it would be helpful. I mean, the wastewater fund is healthy, able to accomplish the work. There are some things on the horizon that, the EPA may elect to put regulations in place that are outside of our work scope. But other than that, the wastewater fund's healthy, but it's tight. We're accomplishing a lot of work within a very rigid rate schedule, and costs of construction have went up a lot, and as you know, and so any funds thrown in the way of wastewater would help get that work done as costs increase and meet the community's expectations. And so I think I believe it's good use of money either way, whether it's used on stormwater or wastewater or both. And we can provide the detail that Commissioner Davis is asking for, that's no problem. I don't know yet whether or not a $5 million injection or a $10 million injection will be used on one project, or maybe that's what you want to do, and we can have that discussion the next time, or be used to sort of optimize the performance of the WIFIA package. I don't know if that helps at all, or if that addresses your points, Alan.
Yeah, no, I think it does, and I think that's a challenge and maybe something for the commissioners to take up in terms of, are you funding specific projects, or like you said, kind of optimizing the ability to get to this larger set of funding sources, which is the WIFIA, low interest loan model that allows you to kind of magnify or multiply the kind of the reach of those dollars.
Yeah, I think traditionally, this commission has really favored expenditures that allow us to leverage other funds. And so, assuming that's still sort of the spirit of this commission, I don't know that we have to fund an individual project so long as we are using our funds in a way that leverages the most opportunities overall. At least that's my thinking. Are there, I have two hands up, but I was just going to see, are there questions specifically in follow up to what Jeff just said? And if so, go ahead and blurt them out, because I don't know whether your hand's up for a different comment or to respond to that.
I think Commissioner Bynum has her hand up.
Well, just to look at this a slightly different way, we know this is the list of the priority projects, and one or more of these might be near or complementary to a development project. And the one that's popping out to me is Jersey Creek, because we know that we have approved at least a land bank transfer of property right there at 13th and Parallel for a pretty substantial project in that area that's pretty exciting to the area. And it probably does need the Jersey Creek improvements to correspond with the development project. And I'm throwing that on the table as maybe another way to look at how we might allocate if we're going to use ARPA for stormwater. We've got a project in the works right there. So I'm throwing it out as another consideration, if you will.
I think it's just a different kind of leveraging, Commissioner Bynum, right? There's leveraging
Right,
dollars,
exactly.
and there's leveraging opportunities. We look to leverage both the dollars and the opportunities. So I definitely appreciate that. And also, this committee has expressed, community benefit, and the amount of community benefit that we're getting is also important to how we choose projects specifically with all of our funding, obviously, but specifically with this ARPA funding. And obviously, if we're leveraging on a development project, there's an additional community benefit that we gain from that. So I think that's an excellent point. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, very quickly, because I know I've spoken quite a bit here. There's also the recent announcement of the base grant application that's coming from the state of Kansas. It's $100 million within that fund, and infrastructure is one of the I guess it's all centered on economic development, but infrastructure, I'm looking at it now, water, wastewater, stormwater, other utilities are part of that. And so I know with WIFIA that would be a loan we'd have to pay back. We could also look at pairing ARPA dollars with base dollars coming from the state and also get some of these projects funded. Again, I'm all for it. I think we just need more details on what's going on and kind of how much money you all would need. But I would highly, highly encourage all of our departments and nonprofits to apply for the base funding.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, definitely leveraging is the concept of the day today. Commissioner Townsend.
Oh,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. And since Commissioner Bynum put it on the record about the project that is pending out of the option agreement land bank system, 13th and parallel, there was also another project that was taken out of the EcoDevo or passed out of EcoDevo and ultimately by the full commission during that same standing committee meeting. And that project was for homes right off of 5th and Parallel on that northern and western corner, which is right across the street from the start of the most eastern start of Jersey Creek. So that's just on the record, another leveraging opportunity for that. But I guess my takeaway out of all of this is to hear Mr. Fisher say that in either category, if ARPA money is spent, whether it's the stormwater or the wastewater, it would be money well spent. So with the additional details that have been asked for by Commissioner Davis, most of us have seen these projects so many times, we could almost make up a number, but they're big. So I get that. But you know, I'm encouraged to hear that either one of those categories of infrastructure projects will benefit from the ARPA dollars. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Commissioner. Kathleen?
So I just wanted to contribute some general capital funding policy or practices or approach that generally is done. And it's done this way in most cities I've been at. This city's been a little different, and we're hoping to move away from the current practice to a best practice. So right now, there's in the past, there's always been this conversation about, oh, we're going to pay for this project with cash and this other project with debt. And this project, we're going to pay for grants, and they're all kind of segregated to separately. And really, in good capital planning practice is that you have an entirety of a capital plan. You have, you know, within categories. And then you find the revenue sources to fund the totality of those projects. So then you bring in the revenue. So all the capital planning is happening out of one fund, except for sewer and storm, which would have their own funds. But and then you bring in a myriad of funding sources, cash, debt, grants, to pay for all the projects. So those funding sources aren't tied to a specific project. The funding source is a mix that supports all the projects. And if there aren't enough funding sources to pay for the mix, then you start to sequence the project between the years or cut them out based on prioritization. So this whole concept of what I think what Jeff's trying to talk about is that, you know, we can use ARPA dollars and just dedicate it to a specific one or two projects, or we can say, hey, we have this entire program, and this is our gap, and this is how much in funding we require, and so that we can backfill it with ARPA dollars to support the projects that are on the list as they are sequenced over the 5-year period. So just sharing a little bit of a different way of thinking about capital planning.
I appreciate that. I think it's a harder way to think about our budget because, you know, we're thinking about how do we pay for what we want, like you would walk up and buy a sweater at the store. But I always try to liken it to the things that we do at home, right? And the reality is if we have to replace our refrigerator at home, we're like, well, we're gonna take a little bit out of this paycheck and a little bit out of this savings account, and we're gonna piece it all together and we're gonna pay for our refrigerator. And so that's kind of what we're looking at here. We need Jeff's help to help us figure out where little pieces of money can come from to pay for
Yeah.
nine refrigerators in this case, unfortunately.
Exactly. You hit it right on the head.
All right, if we're gonna stay on our topic agenda here, we need to be ready to move on, but if there are any last questions or any last words of direction for Jeff, jump in or forever hold your peace. Or at least till the next meeting. All right, then let us move along to facilities. We have more than enough to keep us busy here. Staff, I will let you take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
I believe, can you hear me?
yes, Jeff.
I believe John Kelly and Greg are going to speak to some of the details, and they have, and along with Kathleen, there are some, there's an Excel worksheet that we can reference. I guess to start, I will take us to the subcommittee discussions around facilities. There's been a lot of real healthy discussions. We are meeting this afternoon again, and we are about a month away from having a final draft document for the facilities and Parks and Rec subcommittee. And one of the general themes about that subcommittee or the discussions as it's taken place is we have a lot of facilities in all classes, and we need to explore reducing our liabilities. And so we know we've got the Amoresco tiering study that should be wrapping up in the first quarter or early second quarter of this year. And then Parks and Rec has started the micro study around some of its facilities to better understand what our liabilities are versus what our opportunities might be. And so I guess before we get into some of the details of how the ARPA money could be spent on facilities, I would just remind us that it's okay to, I would suggest it's okay to wait a little bit longer. Maybe you set some funds aside to do the work that John and Angel are going to describe at some future date. But maybe we get those studies back, evaluate what our liabilities and opportunities are, and then make some decisions on how to spend that money on these facilities. Because one of the strategies for some of you that are on that subcommittee might remember is, if we believe we're going to cut our portfolio of facilities and properties, maybe we spend some money strategically on those properties that we believe we need to sell or offload in some way to make them more attractive purchases. So that's what I wanted to intro with, and then let John and Angel speak to the specific uses of the money. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, commissioners and the rest of the committee members. John Kelly, Director of Facilities. And Jeff kind of opened up with kind of talking about some of the work that we're doing here in facilities with our consultant Amoresco, which has taken a bigger snapshot at as our inventory of our facilities, looking at the deferred maintenance, and then also as recently as Jeff mentioned, the tiering study. So we are, I think when Jeff says, some of these requests that we're looking for, as Kathleen made mention, for the ARPA dollars that are available for us to use are really addressing mechanical systems, HVAC, heating, cooling type components to the buildings. There's a couple buildings that I know that we have requests, and if Kathleen, I'm just gonna ask real quick, has this committee seen the list? Have they been presented of the list?
No.
No. Okay. All right. And the reason I reference that, if you guys want specifics, Commissioner Davis, you were more like, okay, trying to capture your head around a number, what we're requesting or what we're asking for. I'll just tell you outside the gate, between both city and county,
Our city dollars that we're requesting for out of ARPA is almost $8.5 million to address for city facilities for heating and cooling and addressing air systems throughout our facilities. County, we're asking for 6.2 million. County funding, as some of the commissioners that have been here and have always known that our county funds are always the ones that are fall short for us allowing to get things accomplished and conquered. And we talk about leverage in some of the earlier statements with some of the stormwater. There is a particular project for instance, over in the county for the Wyandotte County Courthouse that I'm requesting a 2.5 million out of that 6.2 request that will assist us in getting that project. For the last couple of years, we've been working, designing and engineering to replace the heating and cooling to that building, along with getting a roof done. And there's some, as the supply chain issues and the cost of construction over the last 5 or 6 years, that project's going the opposite direction from where our budget is. So one of my hopes is that we do get some of this ARPA funding to help us with these projects. That is one building that I feel that is not going anywhere. It's historic in nature. Our courts are somewhat split up now. We have our old court service building at 812 and the old federal building that we have a couple criminal courts that our hopes are one day to move those back into the courthouse. So that's all part of realigning and looking at the tiering study. So anyhow, and then we have some of our parks facilities. I'm gonna let Angel kind of talk about her number of requested ARPA dollars for that. But like I said, I will say that both the county and city ARPA dollars that I'm requesting are some facilities that we've looked at, and we know that when we had the CARES dollars, we spent some CARES dollars to address some of the UG facilities as well as the parks facilities with heating and cooling and air handler systems. So this is just another strike at us going at these facilities. And we want to make sure that we don't spend dollars in these facilities that might come out of the tiering study that we know that we may need to get rid of. There's also that component of the resale value of our properties. And so sometimes you got to spend a little money to make money or even to sell something instead of just taking it as a loss. So those are other things that we're looking at as well. But I will say out of the 8.5 million for city is much needed, and the 6.2 for county is also much needed. Any questions? It looks like Lavert and Kathleen both have their hands raised.
Liver?
Thank you. John, in the numbers you're presenting, does that include your assessment of the Jack Reardon Civic Center? I know the mayor has asked that we look at perhaps federal grants that will allow us to improve that facility, take care of some of the deferred maintenance, and even pursue some improvements that may allow us to expand and even add additional floors to the facility.
So to answer that question, Lavert, that just got brought up as early as last week when we met with Kathleen and Mr. Fisher. We talked about that, me knowing, me and you speaking on the Reardon Center over the last month and knowing that the mayor may have interest. At this time, these numbers don't. We shared that with Kathleen, that might be a conversation that we look at what that function looks like. That function most likely would come under a city function facility, I'm assuming, versus county, where our county dollars are, more slim on the ARPA dollars. But to answer your question, no, not at this time. But would it, if we were to keep the facility, do I think that we would be able to have Amoresco? And let me ask Greg that. Did we have Amoresco early on look at that facility? Was that part of their initial assessment? Do you know, Greg?
They have a broad topical review of that, but we also did a very introspective architectural engineering review of that building about 5-7 years ago.
Lavert's got that.
Identified about $5.5 million worth of immediate needs.
Yeah, and like I told you, Lavert, that number has increased from the date that or the date that that report was done. But I do think that given with this group and where we're at having discussions today, That gives us an opportunity to go back and capture what that building, if kept, what that looks like. It's probably no different. You know, we got mechanical needs down there, and that building, that is some of its biggest needs, is the mechanical systems in that facility, from the cooling tower to the air handlers and so on and so forth, and the chillers.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Clean.
Yeah, so Kathleen here. So the list of the numbers that John Kelly's sharing were provided to us by Amoresco back in June of last year, or July, maybe August, because we were trying to assess what the infrastructure needs are that would be ARPA eligible. And so back in August or June of last year, there was a different thought around the Reardon Center. There was a development being contemplated and such, so that's why it wasn't included. And then further, we chose not to update just yet the cost estimates because, well, right now they're tied to what's in our Amoresco software. And so that gets me to, so, we're going to apply a cost inflation factor given the current construction environment that will, likely increase that total amount. But the key point here is that, what we want to fund are, or assist in funding are, or if this is your decision, is to determine where those buildings that, they're not going away, the best investment for those buildings that and facilities that are inherently, part of the UG and are not going away. So the Memorial Hall, the courthouse, the jail, and there are, for example, on the county side, there are significant benefits to investing in these buildings, not only because it will diminish our future costs, but also it'll address potential harms which may hit us in the future. It would mitigate that, given, for example, if the jail conditions continue to decline, that could put us in jeopardy with the Department of Justice, for example. That is an example. So now this software, this Amoresco software and the consulting firm, they did an assessment, super detailed. The software has, for example, if I remember offhand, the courthouse has over 100 or 200 components in it. And nearly all the components have pictures of every little thing. So it's unbelievably detailed. And we don't want to bog you down with a demonstration of it, but trust me, it's really impressive. So we have a tremendous amount of detail of all of the nature of the needs amongst our UG facilities. And it's very helpful data. So just telling you.
Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of the same thing with the previous presentation. It would be helpful to get just a little bit more detail on this, because I know, for staff or commissioners that have been here for a while, you all may have some familiarity from the public's perspective and new commissioner perspective. There's just not a lot of information and details, and that makes it very hard to justify whatever number we arrive at. And so if we can get, for all of these presentations, right, a PowerPoint presentation that gives a graphic of the different funding priorities that you all would like to see funded, right? The different needs that are there. You all said you were asking for $8 million. I think it would be good to kind of put up some sort of graphic of here's where the money would go. That way we have something that we can work with from a detail perspective. And it kind of allows for us to have some follow-up and have some accountability. It's hard to kind of have casual conversation and say, all right, here you go, here's $5 million. And it's like, wait, what did we just agree to? Oh, that $5 million. I would just like for there to be a little bit more transparency and just, more detail within that. And so not to take away from any of the importance of it, all of these things are very important. I just think the process could be far more better from a communication perspective.
Commissioner, I agree. Like I said, coming into this meeting today, looking at this, I didn't know if we were going to be presenting this particular, some of the slides, but I think next time we meet, we will definitely have our priorities laid out, what we're requesting, so you guys have an understanding on where this $8 and $6 million are being spent between city and county. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
Well, I mean, I could, this is Kathleen, I could drum up the spreadsheet and put it on the screen if that's what we're talking about.
Kathleen, I don't think it would hurt to put it up with our time that I'm at for just an example. If Commissioner Markley, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I think that's exactly, I mean, we need that level of detail, and we ideally, what you guys can do in addition to that is we need those breakpoints. So we need the breakdown, and then we need like the breakpoint of what does option A look like if we're only gonna give you a piece of the money that you want? What's option B look like if we're gonna give you a little bigger piece of the money that you want? And what does it look like if we fund everything? That kind of breakdown is what I think we need, so that we can then go through and sort of pick and choose and say, well, we can fund option A of stormwater and option B of facilities, or we could do option A of both and only spend this much money, or we can do option C and spend a huge amount of money. We need that sort of detail so that we can figure out what those packages might look like as we put it all together.
And I think if she presents this slide that you guys can see, I'll give you guys a couple seconds to look at it. And then if you have any questions into any particulars, but it lays out the pricing, price points per location. And the first description, there's descriptions as well as you'll see the columns between city and county funding, so you understand what is city facility and what are county.
Are you thinking you're sharing your screen or?
No, Kathleen, I was looking for you to, if you could pull that up.
Oh. Well, it'd probably be easier if you did, because I'm not remoted in. So, and
Well,
you're at the UG. Do you have it?
No, I actually, Kathleen, I don't have it ready to go. So I
Okay,
apologize.
give me
I thought,
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
okay.
Questions or thoughts from anybody else? As Kathleen is looking for that spreadsheet, I think the interesting part maybe of each of these, but particularly of the facilities, is that this sort of limitation on what pieces of the facility can the ARPA funds be used on. Now, obviously, we have that other piece of revenue replacement funds that could be used in any way, but we're going to want to use those on everything because they're the easy one, right? We can use them any way we want to. So that's another piece of that puzzle of kind of figuring out what funding can go to what. Is if there are facility things we want to do that don't fall into the categories allowed by ARPA, we're going to have to use that revenue replacement if we want to do that piece of the facilities project. And that's going to take money out of that more flexible category that we could otherwise spend from. Go ahead, Alan.
Commissioner, certainly, and as you heard from the team, provide more detail. I think part of the challenge here, and not to speak for the teams, is that in each of these categories, the needs significantly exceed the available dollars. And so I think part of the challenge of this subcommittee will be to kind of think about, from an overall allocation perspective, how much do you want to put towards infrastructure, however you define that. Is it 10%? Is it 25%? Is it or is it $5 million? And then so it's kind of it's a both and in terms of building up, but we know from having done the analysis on, for example, the building needs, that building needs number is in the tens of millions of dollars and exceeds. And so they can and will come up with, you say, you have $1 million to work with. What are your highest priority for that $1 million, and come back and deliver that answer. Or, to Lavert's point, you say, we want to do a special project or a high profile project like the Reardon Center, come back and give us that number. So I think is a top down and kind of a bottom up on this that can be helpful in
Right. Yeah.
helping you all make decisions and helping staff get you the information that would be helpful to you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody here doubts that you guys can spend whatever amount we're willing to give you. So I don't think there's any concern from that perspective. We know you could spend whatever amount that we're willing to give. I think what we are trying to figure out as a committee is, as we're tracking these ARPA expenditures and we're putting out on this special website, what did we do with this money and what did it look like? We've got to know, we can't just say we spent money on facilities. We've got to be more specific than
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to figure out what makes the most sense out of the projects that we know are priorities, or that you're telling us are priorities and we're agreeing with you, but we need to know what is that project, and we may want to choose one project over another because of the way it's going to look out on that website and what it shows the community that we're doing and the amount of impact that it's going to have. For instance, remodeling, my office in the 9th floor, that would be a stupid expenditure, right? Like nobody wants to do that. And it doesn't impact the community at all. But there are other facilities that we have community members going in every day. So we might choose that facility to work on over a facility that you guys might say, well, we think it's a higher priority, but we might say, well, for ARPA dollars, we really want to show the community impact. So it's got to be something that people visit every day. So I guess we're just looking for your help in figuring out, like I said, we know you can spend the money. We need to know what. I think Commissioner Davis is right. It's hard for us to say, let's spend $10 million without kind of seeing what that $10 million
Absolutely.
looks like. Go ahead, Commissioner Davis, go ahead.
Yeah, and community benefit is huge, right? Because there's the one part of this is going to be on logistics and what makes the most sense. There's the other part of we have to sell our decisions to the public and justify them. And I think that message needs to resonate, and it needs to be kind of sent all the way down, right, from the 9th floor of we are going to be held responsible, right? We're stewards of this money. And so what we're asking for, this level of detail so that we have justifications that we can go back to our constituents and our residents and say, this is what we've done with the money. One of the things that you all can look at and probably work with Ashley Hand is kind of what were some of the community feedback regarding facilities? Do we have any community feedback regarding, right, infrastructure, wastewater, stormwater? If you all can line that up with your own expertise, right, and skills of, okay, this is what I think, and we have community buy-in, those are huge wins that we can really promote. Right, because part of this is technical. The other part of this is we need to let the community know what we are working to improve the quality of life here in Wyandotte County. And so I just wanted to let you all know that. And if you all want to go and look at their websites or communicate with our communications department, that would be a phenomenal asset to us for this committee.
Kathleen?
Kathleen, you're muted.
Got it. Sorry, I had the spreadsheet here.
Okay.
So, so here's a list of all the HVAC related type facilities, and gosh, I don't know if you're gonna, can you see this?
You might need to zoom in a little bit, Kathleen.
Well, hold on, let me try a different way of sharing. How about this one? How's that?
Better.
Much better.
Yeah, okay. So, so to a small point, Commissioner Davis has a great, makes a great point. We definitely need to, try and communicate to our public how our facilities serve their needs and provide services. One thing that often comes up in that realm is that, for example, no one wants to spend money on a jail. Typically, they'd rather spend money on a rec center or some other, but incarcerating offenders is a core duty of the government or the sheriff's office. And in order to make sure that we provide a safe space for those offenders while they're serving their time, we have to, address the facility needs. So sometimes the investments are not always real popular with the public, is my point. So, and as a government, that's our charge as well. providing services that are not profitable. That's what governments do. So I hate to give you that bad news. This is a list, all right? And as you can see, this is the count. This is the city side, KCK, and this is the Wyandotte County side. And so the city hall air handling is totaling, it's $4.7 million. Over here are a variety of improvements that they've identified, and this is all coming from Amoresco. The courthouse, its facility deferred maintenance needs related to HVAC is $2.5 million. The public health department has identified, there's about 150,000 identified that could be improved in the public health department building. The police department headquarters is $1.67 million for cooling, piping, HVAC pumps, chillers, cooling towers. Now, these 5 fire stations have only identified $269,000 in HVAC related improvements. And you understand these aren't the entire facility maintenance needs of these buildings. These are only the ones related to HVAC or air handling type activities, okay? As I mentioned again, the jail requires a $2.3 million air handling facility. Moving down just a little bit, the vehicle maintenance facility, only $307,000. Memorial Hall, there are $984,000 in HVAC related activities. And of course, that Memorial Hall, we're hoping that it will in time generate sufficient revenue that it covers its operating costs through greater activities and events. The parking lots A and C require just a little bit of money. The election office, that building requires $941,000. There are a variety of recreation centers that could use a little bit more air handling system improvements. And then there's a little bit of money for the Wyandotte County Historical Society building. So just one way to look at it, I'm going to highlight them for you. So this building is not going away, right? Because we got to have our courthouse, and it's a historic building. The city hall, well, I don't know. Right now, we're all using city hall. Police station. Well, unless we get a new public safety center, that building's not going away. The jail and Memorial Hall. Okay. All these others could potentially be funded by some other means. Okay. So let's see, and on the county side, so out of the total HVAC related needs of 6.9 or 6.1, the amounts going to those buildings which are likely not going to be changed is $4.8 million. And then on the city side, it's doing finance on the fly here. It's out of the 8.4, it's 7.4 million. And I just also lastly want to point out that these costs are not just going to disappear. In fact, they'll just increase. So they will have to be paid at some point. We can either pay them with debt, which is funded by the Public Building Commission's revenue bonds. And revenue bonds are paid for from the revenues of the respective funds. In this case, the city and the county general fund. So you're either paying them with debt and paying interest, or you're paying them with grant money like ARPA, where there's no interest. So, but eventually these costs will have to be paid for. That's all I got to say. And we have lots of detail on each of these. So we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects.
I appreciate that, and I think that is a level of detail we want, and I think what we need you guys to confirm, what we need staff to kind of confirm and come back with as homework is it these 4 yellow boxes, or is there some reason that one of these other ones would rise to the top because of the, sad state of affairs in one of those buildings or something like that? The other comment I would make is I think the county side funding, we need to keep in mind. We have county side partners, and we are setting up a meeting where we're going to have some of those folks join us to discuss the remainder of our county side funding. So we will want to have those discussions with them to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what remains of those funds and how best to spend them. Facility staff.
Yes, I just want to make mention. So when you guys are looking at this list, and Kathleen just merely highlighted, 3 from the city, a couple from the county, saying, hey, outside the tiering studying, us moving forward, not knowing what our, our total real estate ends up looking like, that those are, most critical ones that most likely we're going to be spending or would like to spend dollars. I will tell you the list that you guys are looking at today, we went through all of our facilities and we did prioritize. So this list that you guys are seeing is a prioritized list of knowing the buildings that we think that are going to be around and spending these dollars. And then also one of the biggest things behind the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years in facilities, given the fact of the taxpayers and the BPU that we currently don't pay a utility bill straight, the unified government paying BPU, that the taxpayers, which are all of us, are doing that all these improvements that we're making for these mechanical systems are much improved with helping with the energy savings throughout our building. So we've been continuing to do that with our lighting and mechanical projects. Just to touch on one little project down here where line 16, where you see the election office. That is one that we've been discussing back and forth. What's that look like for us? Is that really going to be our long-term? It kind of went there when Schlitterbahn came about, and I don't think that was ever really supposed to be its long-term approach where it is today. But I will tell you, we just invested some money into fixing some rooftop units, which was about 20 ton worth of heating and cooling. And there's 11 rooftop units on that building, and the majority of them, almost up to 8, are still from the 80s. So we've been keeping maintenance up on some of these, but something that is functioning and working from the 80s as far as when is something bad going to happen, or what is the electrical savings of going to something new. So we went through, and this list that you guys are seeing today are really ones that we went through thinking that we, if given the opportunity to do it, these would probably be our best investments going forward. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you very much, Livert. I think you're still muted.
How about now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. And again, we don't question the need for these projects nor the amounts. However, I've got to ask, and obviously when these projects were being prioritized, there are others that were not included, like the Reardon Convention Center. And I'm just wondering how things would look if that had been part of, the list. And of course, I guess in my past life, when I was here the past 37 years, 10 years ago, I remember we were forever working on the air handling system in this building. It's kind of like a never ending project. And I'm not being critical, it's just, and I can remember the sniffers in the hallway, et cetera. And so I'm just wondering if these amounts represents Cadillacs or Chevys, and maybe if we can get the Chevys, we can spread the money a little more and include projects like the convention center and projects like the elections office. And again, don't take that as criticism. I'm just asking questions.
So Lavert, all those things that you bring up there are all things that we've also looked at to speak to, like I said, the Reardon Center, whether that was on the horizon like it is now, but I think that's something we can go back and look at. But yes, the critical components of nature, and you talk about City Hall, your days of remembering the components of, the mechanical system and the air handlers. There's several different, from when you were last here, we've done some upgrades. The city, I will say, the city facilities have seen more upgrades than the county. I have some infrastructure over in the Wyandotte County Courthouse as far as air handlers. If we were to take you to some of those, we've just been doing good about keeping up on what equipment's there, but it's way past its time. And like I said, just like in our houses, we make investments there. It'd be nice to say that we can get, 15 to 20 years out of a mechanical system, or some people that know what they're doing or maintain it, or, the term nickel and dime something for a few more years. All those things can be done, but it's just the fact that we looked at this with having the opportunity to potentially do something and do it in the smartest approach. But I will say the Reardon Center at this time, when we were reviewing this, Lavert, wasn't looked at. And I think that's something we could take back in to help offset some of those numbers that I shared with you in that report.
Thank you, John.
Additional questions? Go ahead, Alan.
So I guess not to sort of further, but maybe to get a little clarity from the commissioners. So we've got the maintenance list that you're seeing here. There are a couple of other sort of places that, if you would like, staff could bring back. So, we do have the CMIP, right? Which, we could pull stuff forward off of the CMIP. There, is the fire facilities replacement plan. So there are sort of several other sources that could be brought back to this committee if, in addition to what you're looking at here with kind of the maintenance side of it, if that would be helpful for this group.
Well, so Alan, the key point here is that investment in facilities with ARPA funds could only be spent on these activities and not the replacement of fire stations. So that's why this is all you're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily get the feeling from anyone on this committee that these sort of categories are not within the purview of what we were anticipating or expecting. So I don't know that we're looking to throw anything else into the mix in terms of what we would spend on. Obviously, there are a million needs in a million different categories, but I think unless staff has, some sort of package deal where they feel like there's something else out there that we ought to be considering, I think that these are in line with what I was anticipating anyway, and I'm not hearing a huge outcrying from other commissioners. Commissioner Davis?
I think Angel has her hand up. I'll go after.
Go ahead, Angel.
Thank you, commissioners. And I just wanted to make sure too, because we do have a small presentation for the Parks and Rec piece. And I just wanted to make sure we were able to kind of get that in. I know I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we're getting close to 2:30. So I didn't know if it just kind of sounded like we were wrapping the conversation. Anyways, we do have a little couple slides for Parks and Rec whenever we're ready to move on to that section too.
I can hold my comment. Yeah, I'd love to see that presentation.
Okay. Do you want to look at the slides for Parks and Rec? I'm not seeing any other questions. So, hey, Angel, we might have to roll the discussion on your slides into the future meeing, but let's see the slides.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I
No,
should have
you're
said something sooner, and I was like, I didn't know. But let me go ahead and share it, and I'll run through it, and I can send this out, or we can continue it. But I definitely wanted to bring this before the committee. So my computer is conveniently not responding as I go to pull and share screen. So give me 1 second. see here.
Oh, I think Emmerich has his hand up.
Oh, man.
Uh,
My webpage
this
is
is
frozen. I
Emmerich.
apologize.
My video isn't working either, but I'd like to take this opportunity and let everybody know we're looking for lifeguards at Parkwood Pool this summer. So if you know of anybody, send them our way. Thank you.
Give
Yeah, that's no joke. So anyone watching from the public, or if you can share out on your Facebook, the need is critical. Commissioner Davis, while we are waiting on computer issues, I think you had some comments on the application or some questions or ideas for us. Do you want to go ahead and jump in and share those while we're waiting here?
Yeah, sure. I guess the other thing I would put out there, I do think that a few things. Number one, there was something that Kathleen said about kind of what was eligible for funding. Those things that are eligible for funding have to fall under the categories. We also have revenue replacement funding that could go towards anything, right? Because that money has just been thrown in, right, into our budget. And so that's the other thing that I at least want us to take advantage of and take note of, because I do think that for some of the Parks and Rec facilities, I know there's an ongoing conversation, but depending on usage and again, aligning with community comments, there could be a great community benefits also considering which facilities, right, we can improve regarding Parks and Rec. And so I just wanted to make that note. Thank you.
Angel needs to be promoted back in as a panelist. She's ready to go.
Done.
All right, let's try this one more time. I apologize. My entire screen froze up. Is everyone able to hear me and to see this? All right. So in lieu of time, like I said, I'll run through this, but happy to share it. I'm sure, you know, from the comments from commissioners, we will also need to provide more detail and we're happy to do so. So just want to start off by saying thanks for your time and for the opportunity to present. We've got a couple projects that we'll run through on ARPA needs. And again, I can't say how important these federal dollars have been for our department, for Parks and Rec, and for the community. Most of you know we leveraged a lot of funds from CARES Act, about 2.1 million, and that really allowed us to do some things in our department that we wouldn't have been able to do for a very long time. So we'll go ahead and get started in lieu of time. I believe it was like Kathleen was saying in August and September when we kind of put together this list, and it was very hard at the beginning to find how Parks and Rec was going to fit into the big picture of ARPA and how we were going to meet these requirements. And I know that this slide has a lot of language on here, but I can send this out and get it to you. And I don't want to read all of it, but I didn't want to miss any of the language here because we all know the ARPA document is huge, but this small section is what Parks and Rec will use, will be able to qualify for some of these funding opportunities for. So it's very important. As many of you know, COVID and the pandemic really showed just how important Parks and Recreation is to our community. Our parks were used more than ever. Parks across the nation were used more than ever. So it's really gone to show just how important Parks and Recreation is for the quality of life for our community. So I've bolded a couple things here that I think is really important as we, consider some of our projects for Parks and Recreation. And so, recognizing the disproportionate negative economic impacts that the pandemic has had on certain communities and populations. We've worked really closely with Kathleen and her team on identifying parks and centers that fall in the qualified census tract. And as we move through this presentation, we'll touch on some of those centers and projects. So that's certainly an important key for us and when we put together these proposals. Also next, programs and services designed to build stronger neighborhoods and communities to address health disparities and the social detriments of health. We believe Parks and Rec is a tool to do exactly that. Our trails, our lakes for fishing, playgrounds for the kiddos, our rec centers. And then also lastly, like we said at the beginning, many governments, neighborhoods, cities across the nation saw an increased usage in parks. So want to touch on our, again, this is very high level and we can provide more detail, but there are 6 facilities under the Parks and Rec umbrella that fall in the qualified census tract. And those are Armourdale Community Center, Bethany, Beeley, Kensington, Joe Iamayo, and then actually the Parkwood pool in the facility, the upper level. So we did work very closely with Amoresco. John Kelly and his team, Greg Wooten, have been amazing helping us gather this information. They haven't left Parks and Rec out in this process. And so we've gathered some really good data, and this $8 million number that you're seeing is really just for deferred maintenance. And I can provide more detail on that, but it's a lot of what John Kelly and his team mentioned. That's the shell of the center, the mechanical, the electrical, and different things like that. Some other projects that we've identified and through this process, and also utilizing information from the 2017 master plan. Well, we know that the community scored trails very high. So since that master plan, I believe it was in 2020, we presented before the commission 4 trail projects, that we wanted to move to try to get going within our community. We are actually in the process this year of getting Clam Park Trail off the ground and going. So we're very excited about that. So the other 3 parks that you see here for the trail projects, Wyandotte County Park, Pearson Park, and Rosedale. So the process around how those parks were chosen was a lot of the data that we used from the master plan. And then you see them here today because we did move forward with those 3 parks when we presented to the commission back in 2020 when we were trying to decide which park to move forward with. Because current day, we only have $100,000 in our budget for trail development. So it is a phased project. The second project that we have, back up to the trail project, I'm sorry. To do all 3 of those projects, and we are estimating this based off of numbers from today. Again, like John Kelly and his team has mentioned, we are experiencing some projects coming over bid, and a lot of that is due to supply chain issues and lack of resources. So anywhere from $1.7 to $2 million. Next on the list, we have Kensington Soccer Field, and we believe that this complex could use an upgrade, and so really putting in some investments to do the work there to make this a nice soccer field complex for the community. Soccer is really big in our community, especially in this area. So to do the renovations would be about $1 million. And Jack, jump in if I'm missing anything. That's 2 youth fields. That would include the lighting and also the grading to get this work done. Playground. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, being in the city center, and we do hold our soccer events here. If you drive by it now, it's mostly a dirt field. It's an old ball field that needs a lot of attention. So we are putting a new restroom in this facility this year. It will go up by, replace the old one between the ball field and the basketball court, in hopes of, if this does get funded one day, we could put some turf soccer fields in there, since it is city center and it's highly used now. That'd be a big addition to our system.
Soccer is one of the larger programs that we have for our youth. The next project we have on here would be playground replacements. So we have an initial ask of $500,000 to be able to do roughly 5 to 7 replacements. And again, it just depends on the location and the size of the footprint of the playground on how that shakes out on total project costs. Shelter repairs, we've been very fortunate to be able to replace a lot of our restrooms in our parks. That was also rated very high on the master plan. And due to the CARES Act funding, we were able to do about 9 of them in a year and a half. So we're looking really good on restrooms. And unfortunately, not so much on the vandalism side, but we're working on that. And so we believe in, just from the information from the master plan, that we also need to really focus our efforts and our investments on repairing and renovating our shelters next. I'm going to pause. I see Commissioner Townsend's hand up.
I am going to do 2 things here. First, I'm going to say I do have to drop off right at 2:30. So if I disappear, Commissioner Bynum and staff will combine to usher you through the last moments of the meeting. And then I'll turn it over to Commissioner Townsend for her question.
Okay, perfect. I'll just run through the rest of this. Clam Park tennis courts, to renovate that project would be roughly $84,000. So again, if you're looking at this page and these projects right here, the total investment roughly to do these items listed here is about $3,734 to knock those out.
Go ahead, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, Ms. Ober and Mr. Webb, and thank you for all you do throughout the year for Parks and Rec. Quick question, could you identify a little bit more particularly, can you put the last page up? There were the 5, the playground replacements. What is that really about? Can you be a little bit more specific? It says 5 to 7 structures. What are we talking about there?
Jack, I'll let you take that one if you'd like.
We will identify however much funding we get for that project. Usually an average playground, a small, is about $50,000. We've been updating playgrounds every year as much as we can. So that would be the structures that we have identified. We will replace them as long as it's within this area. We have replaced almost every playground in the Northeast area, except for Boston Daniels and Edgerton. We do have a build coming with Edgerton scheduled for this year. So that's what that's about.
Okay, well, ding, ding, ding. Those I can understand that Boston Daniels is so small, but we've, asked for more attention to that just in the grooming, the preparation. With Edgerton, that is in sore need of an upgrade, and the request had been made for that to be to include or have included a spray park feature, if at all. So that's why I was wondering what that was about, or what that included. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. That was all I had at this time. Thank you.
Okay, and I do not know I know Commissioner Markley has to absolutely be in another meeting at 2:30. Commissioner Davis, go ahead.
I'll wait till the end of the presentation. I thought you all were done.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Go ahead, Angel.
All right, just a few more slides and I'll breeze through them. I know we're on a crunch for time. And then so also within these requests, we wanted to really consider and capture all of the infrastructure that Parks and Rec does oversee to an extent. And then so there is for consideration infrastructure projects as it relates to the amphitheater, about 1 million to raise the roof of the stage. COVID really highlighted just how just how important it was to be able to social distance and have these events outside for the safety of patrons. And so there's more information that we can provide there for that project. And then also the Sunflower Hills Golf Course. So to do some additional improvements on the golf course, which are much needed. Sunflower saw an increase of golfers, because of COVID. So across the industry, but even right here in Wyandotte County, people were out playing golf. It was a good pastime. It gave them something to do and to get out and still enjoy some activity and social distance. And then I believe this is the last request. It would be additional funding for programming. Our community has, prioritized programming and more programs, classes, activities for the youth to do as very high. And in fact, I know there's community meetings happening now, and we're so supportive of that, and we love to see it happening. And so a little bit of history here that I think sometimes gets lost in just new leadership, and especially here in Parks and Rec, is back in 2012, approximately $350,000 of summer programming budget was cut, and it was never replaced. And because of that, we laid off a lot of instructors. Our summer programs were non-existent, our STEM programs were non-existent, enrichment classes and the like. And as I always find out more and more, and Jack's great about giving me more information, it's so important that we are able to bring that back so that we can offer these programs for our community and for our youth to get them back into our centers. We've done a lot of good work in our centers over the last 3 years on getting building code footprints so we can have state license programs. And so now that those are in a good place, we want to be able to really program our centers for the community. And lastly, this is the final thing that I'll share just briefly. We took a look at other approaches, sent an email out to our metro area directors, and had a few responses so far, still waiting for a couple to trickle in. Raytown, St. Joseph, Ottawa Rec, a lot of the requests that they're asking for are very similar to ours. That's a lot of infrastructure improvements, playground replacements, and a lot of requests for updates to their aquatics facilities. We also looked nationally a little bit, and there are 3 cities listed there, and I've provided the links just to kind of show in more detail what their asks look like. Again, very similar to ours. And then I tried to provide a quick snapshot of the ask for those cities and their projects. I will wrap it up there since I know we are on a crunch for time.
Okay, thanks very much. So your list is long, and that's fine. We know that it is. Commissioner Davis, did you want to comment now?
Yeah, very, very briefly, I think this is definitely much, much better. I think probably the most information that we've been given. I think some of these, for all of these requests, but definitely like that youth programming is just tragic, unacceptable. Please, please, please put youth programming in for an annual budget so that we're not doing one time. I mean, I would like for us to put that in every year, because we are seeing the ramifications of that cut in funding in our youth right now, and it has to be fixed immediately. For some of the other ones that are really one-time money well spent, if we can just get a little bit more information on where the money would go for the playgrounds, which playgrounds, for the shelters, which parks, things of that sort. That way we can kind of ascertain what would be the best usage. But thank you all so much, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we're at time for today. What I would like, maybe Lisa Rangel, you can help us. The next meeting and the next topic, because I personally got myself confused. I know we've got that grant application, in process and with a sample to view coming soon. But did I understand correctly that the next ARPA topic we will talk about at the next meeting is the housing and homeless? Or am I getting ahead of myself? Someone's,
Commissioner, this is Alan House, and we do have next meeting scheduled for a week from today, so the 8th of February. The topic we had discussed sort of housing and homelessness. I think that's a little TBD. So we can come back to this group and get an agenda out to you, but I don't want to necessarily commit today to that topic.
I see.
Pending some further conversations.
Okay, so do we then know our next topic or no?
Kathleen?
Well, so I believe that actually Angel has some additional information on parks, so which you might come back on. But
Okay.
at the moment, we're still working on the agenda.
Okay,
And I
and
think we could do some follows on
Yeah.
today's conversation as well from
right,
earlier.
For
Right.
Public Works.
perfect. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched the surface here. I know there may be some other requests, but I do think we should kind of do our due diligence and finish off with Public Works, buildings, Parks and Rec, and then of course we have that nonprofit application, which could also work into the conversation around homelessness. I was unaware of that until today. People are messaging me about it. I'm like, I had no idea. But I would like for us to at least establish some consistency where something feels kind of start to finish, as opposed to next week starting a whole new conversation and then going back. I think that creates kind of some confusion, at least on my part, on where we are in the process. But I do think that there's a need for buildings, for stormwater, wastewater, definitely for Parks and Rec, and then we also have that nonprofit application. I would be very interested in kind of finishing that before moving to something else.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. And I misunderstood. I wasn't tracking on what you said you were unaware of.
Oh, I didn't know that there would be another conversation on homelessness regarding this subcommittee.
I see. Well,
Yeah,
hopefully,
I was not made aware of that.
hopefully there will be. Absolutely. Okay, excellent. All right, thank you all. So we will be back here a week from today then for our next conversation, and hopefully we'll be working to fill in the gaps on detail information about the projects, potential projects we heard about today, and we will see you all then. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
You too.